Hi, and welcome to the Co-operative Education Interview Skills Workshop. This is what we'll be going over in today's session. Now, interviews can be tough because you never know if you're walking into a casual one-on-one chat or into a room with 3 or 4 people in an interview that will last more than an hour. You also never know what questions will be thrown at you. In fact, the only way to get really good at interviews is to go on interviews. But you can prepare. So today we'll go through ways to prepare and questions that you're likely to be asked. Once you find out you have an interview, start getting ready for it. This is your only chance to impress the employer and to land the job. Once you find out about the interview, go to the website. Make sure you talk to other students who have worked there or consult with your coordinator. Ensure that on the day of the interview that you dress appropriately. Business dress. Arriving 10 minutes early for an interview is really important. Now, most of your interviews are going to be in the co-op office. So you come into the office, check the back wall, and you'll find out what room your interview is in. If you arrive 10 minutes early, this gives you the opportunity to sit down, relax before the interview so you're not rushing in from a class. Some of the interviews are also not in the co-op office. They're in other places in the university. You'll only know that once you arrive. Giving yourself that 10-minute window allows you time to make it to the interview on time. Make sure when the employer comes out to invite you into the interview space that you shake their hand, tell them it's nice to meet them. It's really important that you first analyze the job posting and the job descriptions. This will help you prepare for the questions that the interviewer will likely ask you about your skill set and about why and how you're qualified for the position. Research the employer. Often employers ask the question, why do you want to work for us? Knowing about the company will help you answer this. Maybe you're interested in their student programs or their corporate responsibility. This is information you can often obtain from their websites. You can also look around at their mission statements, their annual reports, or the brochures. This is especially important if it's a job that would have you involved in creating or working with that material, like an audit position or a communications position. Also, always be positive. We don't always walk into the interview having had the best day, but this is our only opportunity to present our best side. So always be positive and upbeat about the job. There are a lot of students you're competing with, and a good attitude gets many students a position. I've had several employers tell me that the person they chose to hire was the one with the best attitude. Keep that in mind when you're going into an interview. How well do you fit in? Don't forget that not only are you in the interview to get a job that gives you experience, but that you have to be able to help the company you're interviewing with achieve their goals. Be prepared to answer questions about why they should hire you, what your work style is, how you handle stress, and other questions they may ask to determine if you are a good fit for their team. These are the top 5 qualities that impress interviewers based on a survey of 1,000 US companies. Notice that the first 4 aren't things employers can get from your resume. That's why they do interviews. Now, your verbal skills or your communication skills are top. You have to be able to communicate and answer those questions effectively. If they ask you a question, you can take a few seconds to think about your response. Then make sure you give short, concise answers. If you're unsure of what the question is, clarify it with the employer. That actually shows you have great communication skills. Again, your positive attitude and interest towards the company and the position is extremely important in the job interview. In terms of appearance, make sure it's business casual. You only have one chance to make a good first impression, so make it a very good one. It's absolutely crucial that you're honest. If you think the employer has gotten the wrong idea of a skill, make sure before the interview is complete that you make clear any misunderstanding. Experience. Your work experience and accomplishments are important, but not top on the list. Experience may get you the interview, but all of the other qualities will get you the job. Here are some common interview mistakes. Being late is a major error that students sometimes make. Some employers won't hire simply because you weren't on time. What I recommend is coming into the co-op office at least 10 minutes before your interview is scheduled. That gives you a chance to check out where your interview is, because as I said, they aren't always in our office. Then you'll be able to sit down and relax and collect your thoughts, instead of rushing in and going directly to the interview. Always dress business casual for your interview. Even if the interviewers are dressed more casually, it's best if you are not, because you never know what the expectation will be. So this means no jeans, no short skirts, no short dresses. As I mentioned earlier, enthusiasm and interest in the job could actually land you the position, even over someone who's more qualified, but who is unenthusiastic and uninterested. Employers know they can teach the skills, but can't teach the attitude. Now, sometimes when we're nervous, we tend to speak really quickly. One way to determine this is to have a mock interview with your coordinator. We give you feedback, then provide you with some tips. Of course, another way to overcome these types of nerves is to practice your interview out loud with a friend or a relative. It really helps to say your answers to questions out loud, so both you and someone else will hear what you're saying. Be sure to look people in the eye when you're speaking to them, but also don't stare. It's a fine balance. Always remember to thank the interviewer for taking the time to meet with you, and you look forward to hearing from them soon. Shake their hands when you leave the interview as well. Be sure if you're a social media user, so Facebook, Twitter, and blogs, that you are aware that these are public domains and that employers will use these to look you up. So, make sure your security settings are high and know that your employability and your online presence are connected. Many of the tips for telephone interviews apply to face-to-face interviews too. For example, when I go into an interview, I often take a plain clipboard with a copy of my resume, the job description, and some blank paper. That way, if the interviewer asks me something from my resume, it's right there. Now, the paper is handy if they say something that you want to remember or come back to later. You can just jot it down. It may even help with the forming of a good question later on. Also, if there are points you want to remember to tell the employer, you can always have a few notes that are already down on your paper. So this doesn't mean that you're staring at your paper answering questions, but you could have down a few main points that you want to make sure you get across. So when the employer asks if you want to add anything, you can look at your notes and add anything you may have forgotten. One main difference between face-to-face and telephone interviews is that you won't be able to see each other's mouths or expressions. Believe it or not, we actually spend some time when we're talking with another person lip reading. Over the phone, this isn't possible, so you have to speak slowly and enunciate so that the interviewer hears what you're saying and doesn't have to ask you to repeat yourself. Also, dressing up for a phone interview puts you in the right frame of mind for that interview. The professionalism is said to come across the phone. The other part of the phone interview is about your smile. You can actually tell when someone is smiling and happy on the other end of the line, so be sure to smile during your phone interview. This will really come across. One other thing to remember is that the employer may be taking notes. So they may ask you a question, you'll answer it, and then there will be silence. Don't feel you need to fill that space. Just wait. They could be taking notes about what you're saying. Sometimes when there is blank air, we just want to fill it. In a phone interview, be aware of that and you don't have to do that. Interviewers want to gather information about the candidate, which is relevant to the position they're hiring for. The most common types of questions used in selection interviews are credential technical, experience, conversational opinion, and behavior descriptive. So, credential technical. These are questions that are meant to obtain information about a person's education, employment history, and past achievements. An example would be, what education and qualifications do you have for this position? Technical questions determine whether the candidate has the technical knowledge to do the job. Employers may include a test or a quiz, or may have you sit down at a computer and do some coding. Another example of a technical question could be, how do you create a form using Access? Experience-based questions provide info about what you've done in the past. So for example, what were the duties of your last job? They want you to be able to verbalize and expand on what's in your resume. You should always have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion to your answers, but still keeping them succinct. The answers will help employers decide who has the best verbal communication skills. The conversational opinion-based questions provide information that describe what you think about a given topic. So, what do you think are your greatest strengths and weaknesses? Or, what would you do if? And then they give you an example that you would have to fill in. There are no right or wrong answers, so these can be tough questions to answer. Now, behavior descriptive are questions where the basic principle behind them is the best predictor of future performance is past performance under similar circumstances. Many of the questions asked will be behavior descriptive questions. So these are ones that usually start, tell me about a time when, or give me an example. You need to think of examples to describe your skills, and the more recent, the better. These ones can be tough, and they're ones to prepare for in advance. This is how you can prepare in advance for those types of questions, using the PAR technique, problem, action, result. PAR is a framework to answer questions, and if you remember this technique, your answers to questions will be clear and concise. If you break it down, P is the problem. Describe the situation. What went wrong? Action. What did you do about the problem or situation? Result. What was the result of your dealing with that situation? Be specific. Take credit when deserved. Be honest and tell them what you learned from the problem, and be prepared with an example. Always use an example where you can convey the situation worked out well. For example, as a result of our recommendation, sales increased by 15%. Or, we didn't all agree on the source of action, but after a lot of discussion, we agreed on an alternative which resulted on a team project mark of 85%. These examples can come from your workplace or from your schooling. Again, make sure that you set it out correctly with the problem, the action, and what you did to make the situation come out in the positive. So the result in a positive way. Here's an example of these types of questions. Response to adversity. Tell us about a time when you failed at a task. Again, you have to be making sure that you're using the PAR technique. There's also a result at the end. Leadership. Tell us about a time when you had to motivate a group to complete a task or project. Teamwork and conflict. What is a team? Describe a problem that you had on a team. How did you handle it? Ethics. Tell us about an ethical conflict that you've experienced and how you handled it. Remember that the interview is also you interviewing the employer. Ask relevant questions. It's very important. There's always an opportunity for you to ask the employer great questions too, and it usually comes at the end of an interview. It's really important to ask questions that are thought-provoking and ones that show you're really interested in the job. These don't include questions with answers that are easy to find on their websites or that you already know. Certainly it's not about vacation or pay. Perhaps the employer said something during the interview that you'd like to follow up on. That's a great way to ask a question and shows you are engaged in the interview. In any case, this slide will help you to tailor great questions to the job and the employer. Obviously, they're generic and should be tailored based on circumstances. Who would make the ideal candidate for this position? How will the work I'll be doing contribute to the organization's mission? What were the best things about the last person who held this position? What do you see as the biggest challenges of working here? And how can I overcome those challenges? Again, make sure to thank the employers for the opportunity to interview with them. We all get nervous during interviews, and that's okay. In fact, it means that there's something at stake. But there's a difference between being nervous and having anxiety. One way to calm down is to breathe slowly and from your stomach, not your chest. The quicker and shallower our breathing is, the more anxious we become. Communicating under stress. Again, making comfortable eye contact will work to make you more comfortable. Be aware of what you're doing with your hands and feet. Are you tapping your fingers? Are you fidgeting? Is your leg shaking? Breathing slower and being self-aware will help curb these nervous movements, which can be really distracting for the employer. So the key is to really focus on the message you're sending. When we get nervous, sometimes we just start to talk, but it's important we really communicate the message we intend. Be careful with your answers, as you want to be sure you're answering the question that was asked. If you find you get off track and can't remember what the question was, it's okay to apologize. Tell the interviewer that you're nervous and you've forgotten the question. Would they mind repeating it for you? And finally, be enthusiastic and dynamic in the answers and conversations you're having. A great way to practice and get valuable feedback on your interview skills is to sign up with your coordinator for a mock interview. Just contact your coordinator to set this up. The Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission Applications and Interview Guide can be found here. If you ever feel that you've been discriminated based on any of these things, make sure you talk to your coordinator right away. Dress for Success. This is a community organization that provides women with appropriate dress for work. You have to have economic need and be in co-op or have an interview. You can visit the Dress for Success website. This is private, discreet, and confidential. For a referral, please talk to your coordinator. Thanks for being a part of this workshop, and good luck on your interview.